few introductions of the design team from RQAW and VICE. First of all, I'm Joseph Morak. I'm the Senior Vice President of RQAW Corporation, Principal Architect. With me on the RQAW staff is Brett, here manning this computer. Brett's an architect, project manager. Eric is one of our project architects manning the other computer. Not with us yet is Phil. Phil will be here later on today and the rest of the week. From VICE and Associates, Jim Escamilla is the president of VICE from Kalamazoo. And Brenda is running around here somewhere.
Trying to get the microphone.
Okay. Stephen and Danielle is running around here, running a few errands as well. So that's our design team that you're going to be seeing over the next few days. To complete some introductions on the county side, I'd like to turn it over to Bonnie for a couple of minutes.
Hi, thank you all for coming today. As Joe said, this is the Mesquite and Tony Planning and Conceptual Design charade, and I'm going to do some housekeeping things first. The restrooms are over here for anybody who needs a restroom. There's coffee and water over there. If you want soda, that's downstairs. There's soda pop machines. Also, if you want to use the Wi-Fi, we have staff that can help you with that. There is, I was going to give you the instructions, but some people have, it hasn't worked for some. So if you need to use the Wi-Fi or you can't get on the Wi-Fi, I have staff that can help you and let us know. Also, please make sure that you're signed in at the table and that you have your name tag. And if you come back other days, you won't have to sign in. If you saw on that sign-up sheet, you can just check off for the days that you attended. And I think that's all the housekeeping stuff.
Turn off your phone.
Pardon?
Turn off your phone.
Oh, please turn off your phones, and I'll do that too. I got to go on. Yeah, that'd be good. Thank you. Also, there are county staff here. Myself, we're here to serve you, to make this a positive experience for all of you. Make sure you all have what you need. The Finance and Management Services Director, Keith Kaplan, will be here during the entire charrette. We also have the EO officer, Mary Villanueva. And she's here, and also she'll be tag teaming with the board liaison, Lisa Chaco. If you need anything from us, if you have any questions or concerns, don't hesitate to share it with us. We're here to serve you and to make this a really positive experience for everyone. Okay. I'd also like to recognize today, this is I'll talk just a little bit about this process. In January of 2012, we conducted a strategic planning process with the County Board of Commissioners, the department directors, the elected officials, and court administrators. In that strategic planning process, we identified 3 priorities going forward that we would work on over the next couple of years on making improvements. One of the priorities was the jail and juvenile transition center. And out of that strategic planning session, a committee was established with County Board of Commissioners, department directors, elected officials, and court administrators. And there were three priorities, so this was the one priority that had probably the largest group. I'd like to introduce, and if you're here, raise your hand. If you're not here, you can't raise your hand, but I wanted to say their name because they've all been working on this committee. And that is the Juvenile and Jail Juvenile Transition Center Committee, what we call the JJTCC. And Sheriff Rosler, and he's the chair of the committee, Commissioner Derazinski, Commissioner Mahoney, Commissioner Plummer, Commissioner Snyder, Commissioner Wilkins, former Commissioner McMurray, Prosecutor Tony Tagg, former Sheriff Bob Carter, District Court Administrator Nancy Hennard, CMH Director Julia Rupp, former Youth Services Director Paul Wishka, Public Health Director Ken Kraus, and Public Works Director John Warner. Though that was the committee that was established to look at this, and from that committee came an interest in involving citizens. And the Citizens Review Committee was established as a recommendation by the JJTCC. The Citizens Review Committee was, it was determined that it would be a representative of each district within the county, and that it would be by application. And so individuals applied and were appointed by the county board, and those individuals are Dorothy Scott, who is the chair, Mark Curtis, Toby Frazier, Terry Knoll, Shannon Larson, Eric Rodoff, Mike Thompson, Norman Ullman, Roger Wade, Gloria White Gardner, and Harry Waringa. And that's the group that's been looking at this issue for the past, I think we started in March, and we've been looking at these issues. This charrette is the result of a recommendation by the JJTCC to hire a consultant to do a needs assessment and conceptual planning and design for a potential replacement facility of the jail and juvenile transition center. And so this is an important phase within this project. Your input is very important, and we will be moving forward with this today. As I said, staff will be here to help you with anything you might need, and this will be facilitated by the consultants who were hired at RQAW, Joe just introduced himself. With that, that's all I have, and I'll turn it over to RQAW. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. One thing I need to add before I get started on the charrette, I forgot to mention Chad Reel from Clark Construction is helping RQAW advice in the charrette process as far as the cost estimating for these various options that we're going to develop. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, good. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for being here. This is absolutely awesome. We have never had a charrette this large before. We did one for Allegan County a couple of years ago. We had like 63 people the first day. Looks like we got over 70 now, so this is going to be really cool, really awesome. So I appreciate you all being here. We'll talk a little bit about what a charrette is. Basically, it's going to be a sprint to the finish. You know, we're going to start now and we're going to end at noon on Friday. And we'll be meeting here during the day, again tomorrow, Thursday and Friday morning. And in the evenings, the design team will convene to our little work area, and we will work on things that were discussed during the day, preparing for the next day. So the design team will be working about 16 to 20-hour days through this process, trying to keep up with everything that's going to happen. So I see a lot of participation from a lot of different kinds of people here, and that's great. I will state we have a couple of rules about a charrette. One is there are no rules, or very few rules. I'll be the facilitator and try to maintain some level of management or control over the process in the meantime. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to establish today, the first thing we're going to talk about is what is the need. And so we're going to spend today doing the need and having roundtable discussions of what people see, what are their concerns about the jail, the juvenile transition center, what do they like and don't like about it, and so forth. But what we're going to do is we're going to start, we have, how many slides have we got today? All together, presentation. We got 139 slides, so I'm not going to bore you to go through all of them at once. But the point that we'd like to make is, while we have all this information here, there hasn't been a single decision made yet. What we've been doing for the past few months is actually collecting information, all kinds of information. We'll go through some of that we've been going through. But basically, we've been spending about 2 months getting ready for the next 4 days. So having your involvement will tie this thing together, fill in some of the blanks. We have a lot of statistical information, but in some of the information, it begs questions like, why is it this way? And many of you may have the answers to some of those questions, and then we can come to some conclusions. So basically what we're going to do is going to be an intensive effort. It's going to be interactive. One of the things we're doing in this charrette that's different from anything we've done is we have Eric from MLive here. He is kind of posting the process and progress of the charrette in real time. And I'm assuming he's probably getting some feedback back. So while we're having some of the public input sessions, there may be things from the outside this room, questions that may be coming in, and the information is going out kind of in real time. So it's a little scary to me, because this is a very unpredictable process. You never know what's going to come out of it. But I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So like I said, it's a very intensive 4-day process, and what we're going to do is we're going to establish our needs, we're going to develop an architectural program, and design concepts. Tomorrow we'll spend the morning developing an architectural program, which is basically a list of all of the spaces and the square footage of all the spaces for both of these facilities. Then from there we can begin to structure budgets, begin putting design together. We'll start discussing design concepts tomorrow afternoon. We'll do more design concepts on Thursday. And from the looks of it, I think we're probably going to end up with somewhere around 12, maybe a few more options. And on Friday, we will be presenting construction cost estimates, project cost estimates, staffing analysis, and operating budgets for every single option. Then at the end of the design and programming charrette, we'll adjourn on Friday. The design team will go back and prepare a summary report of the charrette, and we plan on presenting it to the next JJTC committee meeting the next Thursday. So that's a lot of work in a short period of time. As I mentioned, what we're going to do today, we're going to talk about a couple things. We're going to talk about the process and the statistics we collected and the information to build what is the need. How big does the jail need to be? How big does the juvenile transition center need to be as far as its mission, the people it serves? From that, then we develop square footages and designs and such. So we're going to go through the needs assessment first. I'll spend about an hour doing that, hopefully an hour. It's a lot of information. And then we're going to start with a roundtable discussion on the jail. And what we want to do in the roundtable discussion, we'll start with staff and say, what are your core missions and values, and what's good about the jail, what doesn't work anymore about the jail. And then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back and do the same discussion about the juvenile transition center. Then we'll have a discussion about the potential of combining these two facilities together. There's been some discussion from an economy standpoint. It might make some sense. There's some common services that we might be able to reduce some redundancies on. There's also some operational concerns combining the two. We'll discuss that as well. Then we'll recap for the day. One thing that Jim Escamilla and I have agreed to do is at the end of every day, Jim and I have agreed to stay behind here, and for any of the public who can't attend during the day because they have to work or do something else, Jim and I will stay behind, and for anybody who wants to come at the end of the day, we will do a recap of the day to inform anybody who's interested. And that way we also get out a little bit of work, and the design team has to go back and do something else. All right, so hopefully we'll be out of here at 7:30 or so, 7:30. It'll be a long day, and we'll take our breaks. From a needs assessment, the first thing we do is to start collecting data. And I got to tell you, we collected a lot of information. We put a lot of county staff through a lot of burden collecting all these things. And some of them got tired of us asking them. But this is a lot of work collecting this. We're looking at historical information primarily from the jail. information about the county in general, information about the Juvenile Transition Center, the populations, the programs, and things that they serve. Then from this information, we're going to attempt to make projections into the future. What we want to do is we want to project at least 20 years into the future what this need is going to be. For instance, you don't necessarily want to build a facility to meet your current need, and the day you move in, you're full. So we're going to look into the future and try to anticipate. And I tell people all the time, we don't have a crystal ball. We can't tell you exactly what the jail situation or the juvenile capacity is going to be in 20 years. If we had a crystal ball, I'd be playing the lotto, not be playing architect. So there's a lot of factors that go in here. So most of our projections are going to be done in ranges. We're going to talk about classification. One of the things that establishes the needs in a jail facility in particular is classification. What classification is the separation of various kind of inmates. In fact, you have to separate them from each other. And we need to take that into account because right now you're operating overcrowded. The jail's been overcrowded for 10 years, and you do not have the ability to separate everybody the way that you should. So we have to talk about classification and how that impacts the projections that we're going to make for the future. Then we're going to talk about standards. There are jail standards, juvenile standards, Board of Health standards that we have to comply with. And that has an impact on how many square feet we have or what kind of spaces we have in the building to support the mission of that facility. And then we're going to talk about existing facility deficiencies. You know, it's not all about, and it's the case with both of these facilities, both the jail and the juvenile, it's not about the fact they're too small. It's the fact that they were both built in an era that is different than today, and the physical plant simply no longer supports the mission that they need to achieve. So it's not just about capacity. I'm not going to read all these, but this is the information that we requested from the county staff. And again, we collect, and on the right-hand side is the sources of the courts, various outside agencies, the jail, the juvenile center, other departments in the county. We involved a lot of people in collecting the information that we're going to be talking about today. And on the left-hand side is kind of the list. You know, we got crime reports, arrest reports, the average daily population in the jail and the juvenile facility, the average length of stay, which is a very important factor. How long are people spending in these facilities? And then, again, the intent of establishing this historical information is in order to produce projections. The other thing we took into account is that 5 years ago, the county had a criminal justice consultant perform a needs assessment and some architectural programming. This is a nationally recognized firm, and that's kind of where we started. We said, well, what did they do? What did they talk about? What were their conclusions? What information did they gather? And then we built on that. So we didn't really have to reinvent the wheel in all these cases. So we used a lot of that kind of information as well. So as far as establishing these projections, one is the purpose is to establish trends. Are things going up, things going down, things staying the same? And why is it that way? And then sometimes we build what we call snapshots. You know, sometimes you can establish 10 or 20 year trends from information, but sometimes there's little gaps in information. So what you do, you go into the facilities and build a snapshot. Well, for instance, like who's here today and why are they here? What are their crimes? And so you build some snapshots to fill in some of the other information, sometimes difficult to get. Then we do projection modeling, and we let the computer do that. We looked at court cases, filings and dispositions and so forth, because one of the things that we recognize is the jail, for example, does not exist on an island. It is part of a justice system. The Juvenile Transition Center is not an isolated facility. It is part of a justice system. So it involves courts and prosecution, and law enforcement, and all these other factors. So building this historical data, we're filling in with some gaps that we will have questions and some interaction from all of you about why are things the way they are. I mentioned classification. One of the things, particularly in the jail, that you don't have the ability to do, that we're going to have to account space for, or bed capacity for, is classification. And in many jails, there's up to 16 different classifications of inmates. For instance, in a jail, you have to separate males and females. You know, adults and juveniles, not too many juveniles in jail unless they're waived. I separate older inmates from younger inmates, felons from misdemeanors, violent from nonviolent. There's all these combinations of people. And we need to separate these people because you're not supposed to commingle them. And from a management standpoint, it's easier to manage like people and like cell blocks. Well, when you have a situation in the jail like you have now, you've been overcrowded by probably 80 to 100 people for 10 years. You do not have bed space available to separate these people. So typically, the capacity of a facility is operationally full when the facility reaches 85% occupancy. So you need to have about a 15% classification factor in order to achieve allowing people to have separations, because no one cell block is ever going to be full, because you'll never have the perfect combination of all the right kind of people to have every bed full in the jail. And that is very important when it comes to safety and security of not only the inmates, but the staff and the efficient operation of the jail. Everything we do in this charade, as far as the programming and the design, has standards that have to be complied with. From the jail standpoint, there's the American Correctional Association standards. These are federal standards, been around since 1981. We're on the 4th edition of those federal standards. There's also the Michigan Jail Rules. On the juvenile side, there's a Board of Health rules, all kinds of licensing rules that are governed by the state, and those dictate the kind of facilities we have and how big sleeping rooms might be and things of that nature. So everything we do is going to have to be in compliance with these standards. And we tell people, when we say, okay, we have to have an indoor recreation area in the jail. It's a minimum of 1,000 square feet and minimum 18-foot ceiling height. We're not making that up. That is the standard that we have to comply with. And when the Department of Corrections comes and evaluates the jail, and they do their inspections, they come and say, okay, do you comply with these rules? And they check things off, you do or you don't. And so we're trying to get in compliance with all the standards as well. The compliance, there's lighting levels. Natural light is required in all of the spaces. One thing that's a difficult situation now is continuous observation. The standards call for continuous observation of inmates. The way that your jail is designed and built, it's impossible to do. It was a linear construction. It was built. It was kind of typical of the day when it was built, but it doesn't meet the needs and the standards and the criteria today. And what this difficulty in observation means is it's a staff-intensive facility, that newer facilities could potentially be more staff efficient and lower cost per inmate to operate than older facilities. Okay, let's go into some of the statistical information. It's kind of interesting when we started collecting this information. We saw a lot of trends that were kind of consistent starting around 2002, 2007, 2008. Things began to change, statistically at least, in the county. But one of the things that we always start with the county population. Basically, over the last 10 years or so, the county's experienced a population drop of basically 1%. And that's fairly consistent with the state of Michigan. I believe the state of Michigan was the only state in the union in the last census that lost population. A lot of that is probably due to the economic situation, which you always have to take that into account when you're making projections, because that's a completely unpredictable factor in any of this. But so we start with the county population. because it's a phenomenon that even in places where the county general population is decreasing, it doesn't necessarily mean the jail population decreases, because they don't always have an exact correlation. There's a lot of other factors involved in the jail population that has no relationship to the county population. So in essence, we're looking at roughly a population now a little over 171,000, 171,300, something like that. And the projections, some of our statistical information for population came from the West Michigan Shoreline and Regional Development Commission. There's a lot of things that are hard to say in this charade. But projecting an actual increase of 2 to 3% over the next 20 or so years in Muskegon County. And again, that's completely unpredictable. They take in birth and death rates and economic situations and so forth. But there is projection, at least what's published now, is a slight increase in the county population over the next 20 years. I found this slide to be absolutely fascinating. And you're going to think, boy, Joe is nuts. But there's a couple of things. While the population, we've collected statistics here. The first 5 years, 2000 to 2004, where it was information that was collected through the Carter Global Lease study that was done in 2006 and 7. And then information from 2006 and on is information we were to collect. We collected more recently. But you look at the chart, and these are reported crimes in the county. And you look at this chart, and you see, obviously, there is a decrease in the amount of crimes being reported in Muskegon County. Okay, that's good news. There's bad news associated with this, though. The blue, the top of the line over here is total crimes. The blue lines on the bottom are what they call index crimes. The FBI keeps statistics, index crimes and non-index crimes. You'll notice that while the total crimes in the county are going down, index crimes are up sharply. I'm going to read to you a list of, there's 8 index crimes. Murder, robbery, rape, burglary, aggravated assault, larceny, arson, and motor vehicle theft. Okay, those are your serious crimes. So I found it interesting that while crime as a total was going down, the serious crimes were up significantly. That has an impact on who's in your jail, why are they in their jail, and how long they're in jail. Okay. Likewise, arrests reflect a very similar graphic. Total arrests are down, but the arrests on index crimes are up a significant amount, substantially equal to the amount of reported crimes. Likewise, to match this similar information, caseloads, both in circuit court and district courts, are down, consistent with lower arrests, lower crime being reported. This chart, it's a little bit redundant, but one of the things in going through the courts, and you try to analyze, part of how long people stay in the jail is a function of how long it takes them to get through the court system. And so you have court cases that might be continued or reopened and so forth. And we think we see a trend that the index crime, the increases in index crime, is making it difficult to dispose of these cases as quickly as they have been, say, 10 years ago. The more serious the crime, the longer it takes to get through the court system, the longer people are waiting in jail to be processed. And when they're sentenced to the jail, their crimes are going to tend to be longer than they were 10 years ago. Again, for the most part, the trend is somewhat consistent but slightly decreased. And through all of these statistics, they all trend pretty much the same way. So that's indicative of the system is working fairly well. Things are being working fairly consistently. this chart is about the average day, ADP is the average daily population of the jail. Now, this particular thing makes it really, really difficult to make projections for what the future is going to bring, because the population of the jail has been controlled or managed because it's been overcrowded for 10 years. So how do you make a projection from something that's, the population has been flat for all these years? So basically, the capacity of the jail is 370. That's the rated bed capacity of the jail, which you can see that we're operating above 400 pretty consistently. So there's extra bunks here and some mattresses and things, and finding room for people to, again, manage the overcrowding situation as best possible. So you would have to ask the question, well, does that mean crimes and everything are staying consistent? The thing is, the jail population has been managed through a number of different ways. And one of the things we need to discuss today is what are those ways the jail has been managed? What are those things that are being done? And are they effective? And would you continue to do them if you had a new jail that was a bigger jail? Would you continue to do those? And I would say probably some of them, at least some of them you would. And some of them you might ask, well, at what point does it reach a saturation point that we're releasing people before they come into jail, people that we would really rather not release if we had a choice? So all those factors are going to go into some of these projections that the statistics statistically you can't project this out. So there's other information, other factors that we're going to discuss today to come up with an answer. And I remember there was I mentioned in the last JJTCC meeting, I mentioned a 600-bed jail. We did a program for 600 beds. But we haven't come to that conclusion yet. We don't have a bed capacity projected for the jail yet, but we had to make some assumption in order to come up with an architectural program. So we're going to have to fill in the blanks, and hopefully we'll get to an answer there. The other thing too is that off and on throughout, occasionally, I don't think the county's boarding any prisoners outside the county right now, but over the years that has gone up and down. It's been kept to a minimum though. And the reason that is it is very expensive to house inmates outside the county. Besides paying another county money to keep them, you still have to pay medical expenses, and then we have transportation expenses. We're taking either somebody out of the jail to transport these people or somebody off the road to transport these people, and it's just a very expensive proposition. So the decision was made, as you can see, several years ago to limit that and try to manage jail population as best you can internally. Admissions to the jail, again, follows pretty much, they were climbing up through 2000 to 2006. When the economy started to fail in 2007, 2008, that's when all of these things continue to go down. And so the admissions to the jail, similar to the arrest rates and so forth, that all went down. Now, one question I would have is I would assume that when I see statistics like that, I tend to believe it's because there's less police on the street. The county, municipalities, and so forth have had to reduce their budgets to deal with reduced tax revenues. So you have less law enforcement on the street, which means there's going to be less people brought into the jail. I think it's that simple. Sheriff, am I right? What do you say to that? Let's go back to that last section. You notice that in the admissions here, the blue lines are the male inmates, and the red is the female. You notice that the percentage of female population being admitted in jail is a pretty significant amount. I think we have a slide on this a little bit later. But I think as compared to nationally, yours is a little bit higher. The green areas, we didn't have information back in the previous study as far as male and female admissions back then. There's three factors that go in, or two factors basically, that go into the average daily population of jail. One is how many people are coming in the door every day, and how long do they stay? It's just like if you had a hotel, if you owned a 200-bed hotel, you have 200 people show up one day and they stay one day and leave, and 200 people show up the next day, they stay one day and leave. Everything's great. But if you own that hotel and 200 people show up the first day and 100 of them decide to stay 2 days, 200 people show up the next day, you have a problem. That same kind of phenomenon happens in your jail. But basically, your average daily population is a function of how many people come in the door versus how long do they stay. And we've collected the information, during the Carter Global Study information, the average length of stay was, pretty consistent, 15 to 17 days. The average daily population, or the average length of stay has gone up in 2008 and started to trend down a little bit. And again, this is consistent with the types of crimes that are being committed and the percentages of the violent crimes of people that are being brought into the jail. So, if average length of stay can be altered a little bit, that will have some impact on the projections for the jail population. So right now we're running, about 21 days, was it? About 21, the average person. Now, you have to take into account probably, what percentage? 70% of people booked in the jail are leaving the same day. So you got like 1 day, you got a lot of 1 day people in there. And so you have a couple of people that are 3 months or 6 months that are making up the difference in that 21 days. So this is kind of, back when the Carter Global Study was done in 2007, there was a relatively recent phenomenon of this bed allocation and overcrowding act release, and that was the result of a lawsuit that the county lost several years ago. When the study was done several years ago, there was information was tracked as far as when the jail meets a certain capacity, certain people are released, or certain people go into some other kind of program, or some diverted in some fashion. Okay. This was fairly new back then, and this phenomenon was taking place to manage jail population. So back then, starting then, the jail population was being managed to what its capacity was. In the recent years, this management of the jail population has been done a little differently. I guess a little less formally, perhaps. And that's something I'd like to open up to some of the law enforcement important people here. Is we understand that there are like a lot of people that are receiving citations now in lieu of being brought into the jail, or citations for court appearance. Is that?
Well, yeah, the use of appearance tickets is prioritized rather than lodging for offense. Some instances where an appearance ticket is issued, but the person also lodged for your to prevent any further physical harm to himself or someone else. You got a lot of blank spaces here. Yeah. One of the 207. I'm not sure why they're blank, other than that's the year we switched over computer systems and record keeping systems. And I'm not sure why we aren't able to recover that information from 207 on. Find out.
Is the information, for instance, is the bar process the same as it was, or okay? Because
well, there have been some changes within the court policies in terms of the releases and the setting of bonds and whatnot. We haven't talked about that.
Because our impression of this is that there have been mechanisms in place that, through the statistical information that we've collected so far, we really haven't been able to put our finger on it. But there are systems in place that the county has been exercising to keep people out of jail. I mean, every single day. And it starts in the very front end when the arrest occurs. So it's not something like we're dragging everybody into jail, housing them for a day or two, and then trying to figure out what to do with them. And again, I don't have my finger quite put on what all those mechanisms are, but they're obviously in place. And that's why the statistics are white. We don't know how many there are, or
Well, the use of the appearance ticket is actually what we call law citation. Appearance date. Part of that is also, there's been a change in the court philosophy, the court policy in terms of certain crimes at one time had a defined bond. And that person that was brought in on that particular crime right away was given basically a PR bond or a bond based on that table. First, and then since made the decision that has to be reviewed by the magistrate first and the judge for that bond to be authorized. So staying a little longer, a day or two until they confirm that judge have that bond authorized. That's
because this is one of those factors that I mentioned early on in the process is, of these things that are being done to manage the jail population, how many of these things would we continue to do? And what things would we adjust? Because we want to continue to do those things as long as they're effective and for the type of people they're effective for.
So Sheriff, you say when we talk about the average length of stay being increased, we weigh the assumption it's partially due to the type of crimes.
Can everybody hear me? I've been talking to the front of the room, so we can hear. Sorry.
It's partially due to the type of crimes.
Right.
Also partially due
And
to
several of the tables have shown more serious crimes are trending up, and so that's going to translate into either a higher bond that a person is not able to make, or a defined length of stay in the pretrial stage. Everybody understands it's just a pretrial sentencing stage for jail inmates. At one time, certain types of crimes, a person would be brought in on a certain type of crime. There was basically a table that the staff would look at and say, okay, it's a domestic violence type of thing. That's a $300 bond. The person would post that bond, booked in, and be processed out within 45 minutes, maybe an hour or so, maybe a little longer. The district court judges have since reviewed that statute and said, no, we can't really do that. They have to go in front of the judge first before that bond is truly authorized. So that has increased the stay by at least a day or so before that person can be in front of the judge. That makes sense to everybody so far? Okay. The other part of that, of course, like Brett mentioned, is the more serious the crime, the less likely the person is going to be able to make the bond that is then set. I mean, we use appearance tickets can be used for certain types of misdemeanors. There's no felony. There's no index type of crime that an appearance ticket could be used for. But there are certain misdemeanor type crimes that an appearance ticket could be used for, and we prioritize that with our staff and with other agencies. However, and I'll give you the one I used to deal with when I was enrolled by regular. We get what's called a disorderly intoxicated person walking down the middle of Apple Avenue, jumping in and out of traffic. Pick them up. They're under arrest for a disorderly type action, a city violation, city ordinance. We can't just write this guy the appearance ticket and cut him loose, because what's going to happen? He's going to do it again, right? Most likely he's just going to walk on down the road and do it again. And so we can give him the appearance ticket with his court appearance date, but now we got to do something to secure his safety. Okay? So we take him to jail. He sits in jail for 6, 8, 10 hours, whatever it takes for him to get the low intoxicated limit, and then he's released. But that adds to the jail population for that period of time. It's a very simplistic way of trying to put it. So it's not, if you're confused, please raise your hand if you have some questions. So there is part of that goes on. I mean, the appearance ticket is not the answer to all misdemeanor or low-level crimes that would apply to the appearance ticket. Anything else? Thank you.
Now, this gets to be, this is the $64 million. Through this data, one of our goals is to try to establish projected average daily population for the jail. Now, our challenge here is this yellow line right here. That was the recommendation of the previous study 5 years ago. They basically said in 20 years, you're going to have a jail capacity of 788 beds. 20 years. That made my 600 sound pretty good, didn't it? However, at the same time, trying to do a projection of your existing population is impossible because it's being managed. It's not a real number. It's a fake number. So you can't project that out. But we've seen in all these statistics, from reported crimes, arrests, court cases, that basically in 2007 and 8, when the economy started to take a bad turn, the curve started to bend downwards as far as the capacity necessary for the jail. So for that reason, for the reason that the Carter Global Lee statistics that they projected from, the assumptions have proven to change, I think largely due to the economy. And we're managing the jail population, so we can't project that. So what I want to try to do, and I want to have some discussion on this, is we need to develop what we believe the projection should be. And in my opinion, it's somewhere in between 784 and 460. Because again, what we need to take into account are these factors. A couple things. One is the current capacity of the jail. Then what is that additional factor? We'll call it the appearance ticket factor, the citation factor, or the bar factor. How many additional people do we think we're releasing on a regular basis that would, not all of them, because we would want to continue to do that, but what percentage of those people we're diverting from jail right now should be in jail or wish we had them in jail rather than releasing them? Yes.
Does everybody understand? Probably not what the bar release means. It's the bed allocation release. And each judge in the county has, based on the lawsuit from 93, each judge was given X amount of beds for their need within the facility. District court judges were each given 25 beds. Circuit court judges, depending on whether they were full-time circuit court or part-time, half-time circuit, half-time family court, were given right around, well, a couple of circuit court judges have 100 beds, a couple have 60, and the probate court judges each have like 5 or 6 because they deal primarily with juvenile and probate issues, and we have no juvenile offenders in the adult jail unless the weight doesn't involve. That's a whole other discussion. So the bar means a bed allocation release. So when we hit our maximum amount of people that we can handle in jail, we go to the judges and with each of their bed commitments, so the list of their commitments, and we say, okay, judge, you need to go through and release 10, 12, 15. Judge B, you need to go through and release 8, 10, 12, 15. Judge C, you need to go through and release X number. That's how those bed allocation releases are computed out.
So we have to take into account, those things. We have to compare what we would continue to do versus what we don't think is recommended to do. Yes, ma'am.
I have not heard one word about the ability to manage pretrial detainees within the context of this. There are a lot of people, I understand, they're in simply because they can't postpone. Has that been taken into consideration, the application of PA 511 and community corrections to put people on tether Why if the cases have been, are those issues going to be factored in?
Actually, we do have some slides coming up that address some of those things, but those are exactly the kind of things we need to be discussing. Because, whatever these other alternatives are, some of them we're using, maybe some of them we aren't using and should be using. And so those are all things we want to take into account. So thank you, that's a great question. The other thing, the other factor in developing the capacity is the average length of stay. As we mentioned, the average length of stay 10 years ago was 15 beds. We're now at 21. It's down from 25. As these crimes become more violent, the average length of stay is going to be longer. So, with assuming the same number of admissions into the jail, the capacity is going to continue to go up. So, an increase of average length of stay will be a factor. The other one is classification. Again, we need to provide that 15% capacity to be able to separate people from each other.
Sorry, that's you.
I can do a different color for that.
How about a different color?
And then let's list also other diversion programs. So we might want to cover some of these other slides before we come back to this. What's the next slide? Okay, a couple of things about how the jail is being used. In the statistical information, basically 3/4 of your jail population are felons. And that's pretty consistent with the way it should be. When we collect information, if you see, well, that, 80% of our people are misdemeanors in the jail, you're not using the jail properly. But basically, the function of a jail, for those of you not familiar with it, is a little bit different, or a lot different than a prison. When somebody goes to prison, they're sentenced. They're classified, they're sentenced, they're there for a period of time. Jails have a completely random population. People come in, they come and go. Like the sheriff was saying, maybe somebody comes in, they're there for 45 minutes, and they're gone. Others people come in, they're there because they can't post bond, they're waiting to go to trial. Then some percentage of those people are sentenced. But this combination tells me two things. One is you're putting the right kind of people in jail, and you don't have a bunch of people in jail that shouldn't be there, as far as misdemeanors. The other thing is that the sentenced and unsentenced population, historically, actually before the 1980s, most jails, 80% of their population was pre-trial. And over time, what's happened, policy changes have happened at the Department of Corrections that says, well, we're not going to take them anymore. So the state that pushes these people down, and they're serving their sentence in your jail. So beginning roughly 20 years ago or so, the use and the function of the jail changed. That added to that length of stay going up, added to the number of people coming in, adding to that average daily population. So the function of jail today is very different than if we would have this conversation when your existing jail was built.
I'll just add, as we talk about trends, the trend seems to be that that's going to continue at the state level, push it down to the local level.
Right. And this is another one of those random factors we can't predict. All we know for sure is that the state will always push more of it down onto you. That's the only thing that's guaranteed in the mix. What that is, we have no idea.
They may or may not pay.
And they may or may not pay. That's right. They might start paying, but there's no guarantee they'll pay forever. And so the combination of the sentenced and unsentenced, roughly a 50-50 combination, that is very typical of what I see in jails all over that we work on. This is one of those one-day snapshots that I found kind of interesting too. Is who's in jail and why. So there's a lot of but two things. There were 180 inmates. I found the
So where is that?
Obstruction of justice. Can we get, you know, can that be explained why that's such a large percentage of the?
Well, obstruction of justice is kind of a catch-all indexing or categorizing. It does not, I think, without being look at the specifics, I think a lot of them are probably resisting arrest. An officer goes to respond to a certain type of complaint, confronts the suspect, and goes to arrest them for some type of incident, and there's some type of resistance. And so now we have not only the original complaint, but the original charge, but now there's a resisting arrest charge that attached to that. Obstruction of justice can also be, in this particular category, can be failing to appear on warrants, could be categorized as obstruction of justice. And I got some of my corrections staff here. What else we put into that?
Probably the majority of those are going to be failure to appear.
RNOs, FTA type stuff on
Yeah,
warrants.
mostly FTA and bond goes up.
Bond, okay. And if it's a multiple occurrence of FTA, then the bond is going to be increased by the judge because the person didn't show up the first time, so that's going to compound the population.
Are there any questions on that?
You know, you brought up the bar and you did a good job of explaining that, but I don't think it was ever answered how many are actually being released and then which ones really should be released on a daily basis.
Where are we at now, Dan? We're releasing, we're going to try and get 30 more out today.
Yeah, they're working on it. In fact, when I just left, they were working trying to get some more out. We worked for 17 earlier today.
We are at, for the year, for the fiscal year, we are, let's see, before I went on vacation last week, we were just over 500 for the year, so we're well beyond the 500 mark for the fiscal year.
So that means you're releasing an average of 100 a day?
Not 100 a day,
Okay.
probably average 20, 25 a day.
Are those releases, are those persons that are currently serving a sentence in the jail that are being released?
They can be one or the other. It's up to the judge.
Okay.
Let me make one thing perfectly clear. The sheriff and the sheriff's staff do not release prisoners early. Okay? I want you to put that in paper. I do not release prisoners early. Go ahead.
I think you made a good point. I think we're missing a little bit of that. All of this stuff doesn't fall on the sheriff and the sheriff's department and jail. We have all the municipalities that have police, and the police have their own rules. And sometimes their rules are not the same as but we can't say anything about it, can't do anything about
I
it.
can't set the policy for the 9 other police departments that the jail receives population from. We go to the judges. We say, Judge, you got to get your population down. You got to get your bed allocation down. He looks at his committed population, he or she looks at their committed population, their sentence population, and they look at their pretrial population. They may opt to reduce a bond on a pretrial commitment that they have. They may opt to just flat out release somebody early on a sentencing commitment they have. It's entirely up to that judge's discretion. The point that Joe's making is, without the rules, without other processes in place, there's not a lot of rhyme or reason to it. It's kind of a daily thing. And there are people being released, I can tell you, that scare me. I sit up in my office and I watch it, and I know my staff is concerned about the people that we are directed to release. We watch these folks walk out the jail and going, good heavens, let's hope for the best. So it's not the sheriff that makes the releases. We go to the judge, and I know the judges agonize over it. I mean, they take hours and hours to make those decisions because they review case history on that individual, past appearances in court, and they try to make the best decisions they can. But as you can tell, it gets to the point where, all right, we release the least of the worst first, get them out. Then we go to the next level of the so-called least of the worst. And pretty soon we're dealing with the not so least of the worst. We'll have to make, we being the system, not the sheriff, but the whole system, is having to make those decisions. So that's a good question, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Why does the release system have to be based on the judge release instead of the crime?
Because of the what?
Why is the release system based on the judge application instead of the actual crime system?
The instead of the actual crime has committed. Well, I think that's part of the decision-making point for the judge. They look at what crimes that their commitments have committed. I guess I'm not, if you can expand on that.
Well, my question was, if the judges have to release based on their allocation of beds, why is it not overall based on the type of crime instead of just the judges?
They may be doing that.
Yeah. You mean like
Basically, could one judge use another judge's allocation if he's got less?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The judges share beds. Don't get me wrong. If one judge is at 10 beds and has an allocation of 25, and another judge is at 25 but needs 10 more, they borrow from each other's allocation. Yeah, absolutely. And then we also, I don't want to. We're not just flat out always releasing people in the street. We use things like KTEP, the Kalamazoo Pre-Intensive Programming Facility, which is kind of a non-secure housing unit. It's a private company that runs it. So we use KTEP. We use a lot of other diversionary or other follow-up services to try and manage those that get released before their sentence time or their release date.
Ms. Lady Satter.
My question is, how do you handle the people that's in jail that's sick, that are really sick and need to have medical attention? And what kind of cell do they need?
Well, it depends on the level of medical attention they need. We very often end up taking people to the hospital, and then based on the classification, we may end up having to spend money to guard them all at the hospital. If it's a sickness that can be managed through the jail medical staff, we end up doing that. But for the most part, they're in general population. If that's what we don't have any infirmary, in the jail. They generally stay in the general population. If it's a real intensive a need for observation, they end up being held in the receiving booking area in the holding cells, so that there's always staff in that particular area 24/7. There's always at least one person in there, and so that direct observation can happen. But is that what you're asking? I don't quite.
That and also the mental patients, the mental patients that come to jail overnight or maybe stay for a day or two.
Yeah, same type of scenario. If it's a severe mental issue, we consult with community mental health, and if there's a need to transport them to an outside psychiatric facility, and then we have to take care of that. If it's something, again, that can be managed in-house through the mental health case manager or the psychologist or the workers that come into mental health, then we manage it in-house. But oftentimes they end up in general population during their stay there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sheriff, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I don't see any judges in here. Are there any judges here? No. This bed allocation issue, is that something that came about as a result of the lawsuit?
Right.
Is that, so it was imposed by the court, so the judges can't put it?
It was called the Calenda order.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Through the courts.
And they set the criterion for the judges to use to make those determinations?
Well, I'm going to have to defer to Sheriff Carter. It was during his time, but I think Judge Calenda at the time looked at the capacity of the jail or the rating of the jail and said, okay, you have X number of beds, so here's X number for this judge, here's X number for that judge.
Okay.
But one thing I didn't mention is he also reserved, or the order also reserved, a certain amount for pre-trial, not dedicated to any specific judge, if I'm not mistaken, right?
And I assume you're obviously still under that court order?
That order actually had a sunset on, meaning that order expired, but each county is entitled to draft their own overcrowding plan. And so when that order expired, the judges kind of just mirrored that existing order as the current plan.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Did your study include any processes for deterrence? For deterrent? What application do you apply in that process, the process for deterrent? What types of deterrent do we use?
Yeah, that question was, some of the questions was brought up, and we're going to discuss some of those, we call, on this chart, we put reversions. We're going to talk about that for a while. So what are those things that we are using or that are not using that will impact this number? Let's go through a couple of pie charts. As far as race in the jail, about 43% of the population is black, 56% is white, and a small other amount. Again, on the male and the female, 28% of the population was female. Historically, I remember when I started doing jails in the 80s, it was 1.5%. And it has consistently climbed because of the kind of crimes that women are, the drug offenses and things like that are only equal opportunity. But 28% of your jail population being female